Hello there, and welcome to another live chapter reading for Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Today I shall be reading from Web of Evil, Hani's Daughter Mysteries by N.L. Holmes. Chapter 1. Early in the season of Akhet, the inundation, the precocious heat of spring had only intensified. Neferet and Ben-Arib had been relieved to deliver the children to the farm to spend a few weeks in a relative cool of the open countryside. They themselves came nearly every weekend holiday, when Mama, Baketi, Sati and her children, and Mut-tuy and her brood were also likely to be around. "This is perfect for the orphans," Neferet said, staring after the little ones, who had just run off amid a pack of overstimulated cousins. The baby crawled after them, crying, until the nurse scooped him up. "If this gang can't wear them out, nobody can." "And maybe they'll learn some manners by example," grumped Mut-tuy, the oldest of the orphans. At 13 she no longer considered herself a little one. Her harrowed lock of childhood had fallen to a rebellious chop of the knife a few months earlier, but the hair that would become her maiden braids still only stuck out about a thumb's length from her scalp. It wasn't a good look, Neferet had to admit, considering the girl from the corner of her eye. Mut-tuy was tall, skinny and flat-chested. Her face promised beauty later in life, but at the moment her appearance was dominated by awkward elbows and big feet. The ruthlessly cropped hair didn't help. The women of the family sat in the grapevine-covered side yard of the farmhouse and shelled cowpeas while lunch simmered in the kitchen court, filling the house with a delicious smell of onions. At Ben-Arib's feet lay Brute, the mastiff, who rarely left the two youngest Sunet's side. Paws extended, tongue lolling, he resembled a brindled brown lion taking his ease. "Maya kept talking about buying some land in the country, but I almost hope he doesn't. Satutaro, Neferet's next older sister, shook her skirt to empty the folds of accumulated pods. "I so love to come here. It reminds me of my own childhood. And there are always the other grandchildren around for the little ones to play with." Maya, Papa's secretary, was Satutaro's husband. Mama smiled, her slim fingers expertly splitting a pod and reaming out the beans. "It makes me so happy to hear you say that. I've sometimes wondered if it weren't time to build onto the house, though. If everybody's here at once, it becomes rather like a barrack." "No," they all cried in chorus. "Don't change anything," Baketi pleaded from her couch. "Leave it just as it was when we were children." Neferet suspected that was more important for her sister, Baketi, than for anyone. Since her childhood, before the terrible accident that had left her paralysed, must have been the last truly carefree period of her life. Back then, Paquette could still dream of becoming a temple dancer for the Hidden One and having a husband and children of her own. Neferet turned to the woman of her heart who sat beside her. "At least I don't have to worry about you and me and Mut-tuy during the week. We can't leave the dispensary except on weekends." "Should we not come so often, Lady Nubnefer?" Ben-Arib asked Mama. "We don't want to be a problem." Mama laid an affectionate hand on the young woman's shoulder. No, my love, don't even think that way. You girls are as welcome as anybody. You're all our troop of lovelies. Like the divine girls who attend Lady Hatharu," she beamed out about the group of young women who surrounded her. And Mama thought proudly, the centre of that bevy is as beautiful as the goddess herself. Despite her name, Neferet wasn't sure she counted as lovely. While her two sisters took after their mother, she resembled Papa, broad and sturdy with small eyes and a square jaw. She didn't mind a bit. The youngest of the 5 children, she was especially close to Papa, and it was an honour to resemble him. She was smart like him too. She and Ben-Arib were Sunets, physicians who had recently given up their position at the palace and opened a dispensary in the modest neighbourhood of Maya's childhood home, a goldsmith workshop. One might argue about how smart that was, but the two young women derived immense satisfaction from helping people who might not otherwise have access to a good doctor. All at once, Brute jerked to attention, his eyes fixed on the road that led from the farm to the bank of the river. The women's heads all swiveled as if they'd been pulled by a string. Against the ferny greenery of the reeds that bordered the water, a group of men had appeared. From afar came excited shouts. A shudder of uneasiness rolled up the back of Neferet's neck. She shaded her eyes with her hand, strained to see. "There's Maya, but where's Papa?" The 2 men had gone out into the marshes that morning on Papa's little reed boat, and although the river was necessary to life, it could also be a vehicle of death. In its waters lurked crocodiles, serpents, and hippopotamuses. Sometimes at night she had heard the roar of the enormous animals right there in the backwaters near the farm. "Oh no," Ben-Arib murmured almost inaudibly. She had lost so many loved ones that she was always quick to expect the worst. Everyone was on their feet now, and Brute took off towards the men at a gallop, like a chariot horse heading into battle, with Neferet close behind. She wasn't ashamed to hike up her skirts in the interest of speed, and a quick glance over the shoulder revealed that the other women trailed after her at a more ladylike pace. "Where's Papa?" The question made Neferet's heart hammer as she pounded down the earthen road. "Great One, don't let anything have happened to him." Maya, recognisable by his short stature, was waving his arms at them, and the other men huddled over the drop-off at the bank, some of them kneeling. They seemed to be pulling something up the slope. At last a prone form slid onto the land and lay there unmoving. An anguished cry escaped Neferet despite herself, and she forced her winded body to give a burst of speed. At last, as she and Brute approached the man, Papa climbed up from the forest of reeds. Relief flooded her, and she slowed down, daring to catch her breath. "What's happened, people?" she panted, mopping at her forehead. Apart from Papa and Maya, she didn't recognise any of the men who stood before her. They were deeply sun-darkened, like people who worked outdoors every day, and were clad only in loincloths. The unfortunate, who lay stretched upon the ground, on the other hand, was dressed in a kilt and a shirt that came to mid-calf. He was a grisly sight, waterlogged and bleached by the river, starting to swell under the rays of the summer sun. By this time the others had caught up to Neferet, and Mamma threw her arms around Papa. "Thanks be to the Hidden One that you're all right, my love. We saw Maya, but not you, and I feared something might have happened. I was below in the boat trying to lift this poor fellow up for the others to pull," Papa explained with an arm around his wife's shoulders. "These reed cutters had dragged him out of the water and asked if we could help them get into the nearest habitation." With a smile he turned to the four workmen and clasped their hands in turn. "We'll see to it the priests of Impu get him and try to notify his next of kin. You're sure nobody recognises him?" "No, my lord," said the eldest. "Maybe he's a city man." "Maybe, thanks to you all." Bowing and murmuring, the reed cutters made their way down the bank and onto their boats. In a moment the soft splashes of their poles could be heard propelling the reed crafts away through the papyrus. "Phew," said Maya, brushing down his kilt. He slipped an arm around Sati's hips. "A fellow just goes out for a quiet paddle through the marshes, and here comes a corpse." "We need to get him out of the sun," Mamma seemed quite unfazed by the unsavoury deposit on their doorstep. "Mut-tuy, my dear, will you run back and bring one of the servants with the donkey cart and a sheet?" For once the adolescent obeyed without rebuttal. The rest of the family stood on the road, staring in uncomfortable silence at the dead man, as Brute sniffed him with interest. "What did he die of?" Neferet asked. "Clearly no animal got him." "We couldn't tell, my duckling. Perhaps you and Ben Arib can look him over and let us know. We need to find out who he is." Neferet squatted at the man's side and lifted a water-shriveled hand. "He's been in the water for a while, but he's in pretty good shape. Maybe he drowned." She leaned over him and pressed down hard on his chest with both hands. Everyone cried out, and Papa made a convulsive move as if to stop her. "Pleased to have shocked everybody," Neferet said. "No, he didn't drown. He was dead when he went in, or else he'd have breathed in water and his lungs would be full of it." Benarid peered over her shoulder. "His hands aren't calloused. He's probably not just a workman." Papa and Maya looked at each other in surprise. "I don't see any wounds, and he looks too young to have dropped dead of natural causes." Everyone was crowding around curiously now, which helped to block the blinding sun. The man appeared to be in his 30s, his close-cropped curly hair still uniformly dark. It was difficult to make out the features, which had started to grow soft and blurry. Vitreous eyes stared up unseeing. He was slim in build, despite the ominous swelling of the abdomen that had begun, with plenty of hair on his chest and limbs. Bennett continued to examine his hand. "There's just this callus on his middle finger. I think he might have been a scribe." "Not very high position, though," Neferet said. "His kilt is especially fine linen." "Most observant, my dove. If you ever decide you don't want to sing for the Hidden One anymore, I'll bet the Medjay could make a spot for you on the police force." But Mamma gave a bitter sniff. "I'd rather die than work for that awful Mahu. Do we have to report this to him?" "I shouldn't think so. We're a long way from the city of Wasset. We can let them know in the village. The local mayor will have jurisdiction." The clop of hooves and the rumble of wooden wheels betrayed the approach of the donkey cart. Mut-tuy jumped out, and Papa and the driver, with the help of Maya, heaved the dead man awkwardly into the little vehicle, and an acrid odour of manure still floated about. Neferet spread the sheet over the corpse and tucked in the edges. "Somebody'll have to go back to the city to get the embalmer priest," she said, wiping her hands on her hips. But Mut-tuy, looking smug under her effort at casualness, said, "The steward's already sent somebody. I told him what happened." Papa gave her an amused glance. "Very enterprising, my young girl." "I'd be surprised if they send someone out this far," Mamma said, watching the retreating wagon through hand-visored eyes. Papa gave a chuckle. "Oh, I'm sure they will. The high priest is a fellow I went to school with, and when we were lads I saved his honour with the schoolmaster once, and ever since he's been more than obliging." The others laughed. Mamma steered Sati and Najmet towards the house. "Well, let's go back, girls. We left Baketi's alone. She'll be wondering what happened." "I told her." Mut-tuy looked satisfied, her smirk stretching from one corner of the cheeks to the other. Neferet rolled her eyes. "That girl's getting above herself. She'll be telling us all what to do if we let her." But she knew the adolescent was desperate to be part of the group, even more than most 13-year-olds. Her own parents had either died or abandoned her. Her brother, her junior by a year, took care of the little ones unless Mut-tuy was forced to. She seemed not to feel much kinship with her half-wild younger brothers and sister. She'd even refused to follow the path of her father and brother, an apprentice as a goldsmith. But there were more immediate problems than Mut-twy's cockiness, and all three remaining young women trudged back towards the farmhouse, Brute at their heels. Neferet said, "We need to find out who this dead man is so we can tell his family what's happened." "Maybe they'll know in the village," Eve suggested. "That's what I'm hoping. Perhaps if we examine him more closely at the house before the priests of Inpu come, we'll discover how he died or find some clue to his identity." I hope you enjoyed this chapter reading and that you'll go check out the book. Thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.